Hello and welcome to this video on Civil Service Fast Stream and internships. The Civil Service Fast Stream is simply the graduate scheme that you can use to enter the civil service, but you don't have to. There are other ways to get into the civil service, and I'll talk a bit more about those later on. There are 17 different options. They're known as streams, and they last between 2 and 5 years. They can be all over the UK and they have the same starting salary. The website, FastStream, is a really useful one to look at, lots and lots of information on there. It tends to run similar dates every year, and this year it's open for applications from the 9th of October to the 6th of November. The summer internship program is open for applications for the same amount of time. Of course, it's an internship, so it's much shorter and therefore has a slightly lower salary, partly because you're not working there so long. And you may have seen in the press there's a change this year. It's only eligible to those who are from a lower socioeconomic background, and that's because the civil service is looking to increase applications from people from those backgrounds. It's been a bit controversial that they've made this change. When they announced it, there were some articles about how people didn't think it's fair. It's worth noting 2 points here. One is that the internship program always used to be a diversity internship program. It was for years. 2 years ago, they changed that. They made it open to everyone. So this is a bit of a reversion back to what it used to be with a narrower band of who they're making it appropriate for. But it's a change back rather than a complete change. The other thing to notice is that it's never been the case that you have to do the internship to get onto the fast stream or that you have to do the fast stream to get into the civil service. The pipeline isn't quite that straightforward as it can be in some other industries where there's a massive advantage to going through the internship into the graduate scheme. What you will get if you do the internship and if everything goes well is they will give you what's called a fast pass. And that means for the next year, for the next fast stream, so the fast stream applications in 2026 in this case, they won't make you go through the first recruitment round. And the reason for that is the first recruitment round is exactly the same as it is for the summer internship program. So, in a sense, it's just because you've already done that, you've already been tested and found to be successful. So, why would they make you do it again? So it's not offering you a massive advantage over other applicants. It's still very useful. It gives you a chance to have an insight into what it's like to work for the civil service, and that can be personally really interesting. So I'd recommend you go for it if you're eligible. But if you're not eligible, please don't worry because there will be lots of other ways that you can get in. And really, I think the main thing that's happening with the summer internship now being quite targeted is it's about the civil service sending out the message that they're really keen to encourage applicants from those backgrounds and they really want to make the civil service a more diverse place. There are some other opportunities which aim to address underrepresented or marginalised groups, and you can find them all on the Going Forward into Employment page. I've listed them all here. They're not all open for applications at the moment, so you'll need to go in and check, but you can see they are trying to address a number of barriers to employment that different people face. And if this applies to you, go and have a look and see if you'd be interested in going in through one of those other routes. We always get lots of questions about whether or not this is open to international students, and it's important to know that the Civil Service Fast Stream does not sponsor visas. You must already have the right to work in the UK. The other thing is that the civil service generally, not just the fast stream, has citizenship requirements. Look, you need to go and read those nationality rules yourself and see how they apply to you. But generally speaking, civil service positions are open to citizens of the UK, the Republic of Ireland, and the Commonwealth, and then some EEA, European Economic Area citizens, as well as Swiss and Turkish nationals, as it says. It's fine if you've got dual citizenship as long as one of your nationalities is one of those. So that might mean that it is open to you still, but remember you do also have to have the right to work in the UK as well. So do look into that. It is pretty strict. It is a very competitive process. Lots of people have heard that. Here's the numbers to back that up. Last year, there were 676 places and over 84,000 people applied. That's actually a little bit less than in previous years. It was fewer applicants than they've had previously, but it's still a huge number. Numbers of places also dropped a little bit last year, but they've maintained for this year, and I'll talk that through in a short while. Um, you can apply more than once. Anyone can apply as long as they have a degree, or even if they don't have a degree, if they already work for the civil service, they can also apply for the fast stream. I could apply, and I graduated over 20 years ago. So lots of people apply multiple times. I think the average age that people get in is something like 24, 25, and they recruit anonymously, so they won't know how many times you've applied. It won't matter at all. So if you're really dead set on the fast stream, or if you've just got some plans for the next couple of years and you don't want to go straight away, that's absolutely fine. You can reapply or apply later. This is what they ask for. Most streams want you to have a 2-2, either predicted or secured as your degree class. And that's really what they want. It doesn't matter if you've got higher than that. If you meet the minimum requirement, it's a tick in the box. They won't look at it any further. There are some streams that ask for a 2-1, or those three at the bottom with the star, with the asterisk, they will accept a 2-2 at undergraduate along with a higher degree, so a master's or a PhD. And finally, the science and engineering stream asks for a 2-1 alongside a higher degree, so a master's or a PhD, or chartership in a relevant body, for example, if you're a chartered engineer. In terms of subjects, again, most of these streams will take people from any subject, and there may be some in there that surprise you a little bit. Finance doesn't ask for a financial or mathematical background. Cybersecurity, you don't need to have studied computer science. They really are open for anyone. And then we've got some where they do require a certain subject. Go in and have a look at that in a little bit more detail if you're interested in those. But generally speaking, it's what you would expect. For the science and engineering stream, you need to have studied a STEM degree, science, technology, engineering, or maths. For social research, you need to have had a social research element to your degree. So there shouldn't be any big surprises. I get questions often about how to choose a stream. Honestly, pick the thing that interests you most. There's a couple of places where you can learn about what the different streams look like. People have written blogs or case studies about the different streams. You might want to think about which are most competitive, and I'll show you some statistics on that in the next slide. And some of them offer a qualification. So if that interests you, apply for one of these, which have that as part of their offer. You get to choose, I think it's 3 now, streams, and you put them in order of preference, first, second, third. You can't change that once you've submitted your application. So try and make sure it's broadly what you want before you click the submit button. Um, it it does happen that people end up being allocated to a stream that they haven't chosen at all. So whilst I'm saying, think about which ones you want, it perhaps doesn't matter quite so much as you might think, because you might end up being allocated somewhere else. And you can also choose less than 3 if you want to. Um, Generally speaking, though, if you're successful in your application to the first preference, then you get appointed to that one. And if you're not, you get considered for the other schemes. And as I say, you can even be allocated something you've expressed no preference in at all. Of course, you can turn that down if you want to. Once you're in the civil service and you finish the fast stream, it's quite possible to move around with internal promotions or sideways moves. That's really common. So you won't end up stuck somewhere forever. Um, a note from Cambridge applicants. Somebody here, these are sort of previous Cambridge students and alumni who applied, said it is worth thinking about the streams and doing some proper research. They felt they probably should have done a bit more research than they did. You can see there they ended up getting their 4th choice. You used to be able to select 4 different streams, and kind of thinks, oh, I should have put that one first. But mostly I think I've included this to say have an open mind. All the streams have got interesting things involved, so don't feel you have to just limit yourself to one place. So I promised you some statistics on competition. Here we are. Pause the video if you're interested and look at these in more detail. All this information is publicly available. I don't have any secret access to it. It's all part of government transparency. So you can see the data and you could look at it in more detail if you like about 2024-25 applications. Um, right down at the bottom, the diplomatic and development stream is always super competitive. They don't have that many places, and it's very, very popular in terms of application. So, I mean, absolutely have that as one of your options, maybe even your first option if it genuinely is something you're particularly interested in. But it, just be aware that it is quite competitive, and as the previous slide said, think about what your other options are because you may well end up on one of those. Uh, you'll see that only 74 or nearly 75,000 applications are listed here. And earlier I said 84,000. That's because these are people who put down some preference for one of the streams. So we had about 10,000 people apply who didn't put down a preference for any of the streams. And some of those will have got in as well. They're just not represented here. So on average, given that extra 10,000 people knocking around, we see an application success rate of between kind of 1 or 2% for the whole of the FAST stream, rising up to about 6.5 for the operational research, having a pretty good success rate. This is how many places there are in each of the schemes this year. Again, this has been, I've got this off the Civil Service website. This is all publicly available information. They are exactly the same as the numbers last year, with the exception of the summer internship, which has doubled from 250 to 500 places. The purple questions are questions people asked me in advance of this recording and the live session that I did. As someone asked, what have the recent changes been? Well, certainly the big change from last year is that the summer internship is now focused on those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and it's doubled in number. Everything else is pretty similar. Hasn't changed very much at all. Here are the success rates by different demographics. The language here is taken from the civil service publication itself, and mostly I include this to say, again, publicly available. They're very transparent about the way they're trying to manage and increase diversity, and they want to represent the UK population more broadly than I suppose than it has been historically. So you'll see calls for diversity in lots of different industries and for very good reasons. But one of the things that drives the civil service is they're a public body. They feel they should be broadly representative of the population. So that's one of the things that's going on there. And also those statistics might sort of suggest why they've particularly focused on socioeconomic background this year, although I appreciate not all the numbers are completely lined up in other places as well. So I've said it is a very competitive process. I don't say that to put you off. Don't give up. The process can be a bit time consuming. It can be a little bit bureaucratic at times when you're going through the application. Some people do find it frustrating. But if you are interested and you think it's worth doing, it's worth taking a bit of time to learn about the best way to apply and to kind of give it your all. But also take it easy. Try not to stress yourself out. People think you've got to be really stellar. Sometimes they hear that, it's so competitive. They think you've got to be top of the class. This is a quote from talking to an alum who did the fast stream and is now quite senior in the civil service. And she said, really what you need to do is not be the best of the best of the best. Like, you'll be fine academically. You've probably got interesting experience. What you need to do to stand out is do a bit of reflection, think about yourself and your strengths and your behaviours and how these relate to the civil service. It's about finding people with the right mindset and the right potential. It's not about kind of knocking people out because they've made a small mistake or because you don't have a first class degree. You saw earlier, they're not looking for that. They're looking for the right kind of person. Okay, so let's go into the actual process in a bit more detail. For the fast stream, you start with some online tests. They're the same for everyone. Some schemes then have some additional information, Then you go to an assessment centre. There used to be a video interview stage, but they got rid of that a couple of years ago, so that's no longer around. And then most schemes have a final selection board. For the summer internship, there are the same online tests, and then you have a telephone interview. Your timeline will be unique. You will get emails through telling you where you are in the process. You might find friends who've also applied are getting different emails at different times, and that can be a bit unsettling. Just know that it's quite normal. Keep an eye on your email. Check the homepage on the application system if you prefer to. They're pretty good at updating it. You can be quite slow to hear back at each stage. You can be kind of waiting around thinking, oh, I haven't heard anything, I haven't heard anything. Um, but then it can also be quite quick when it happens. So at each stage, they will say, you've got 5 days or you've got 7 days to respond to this next bit of the process. So although you can be hanging around waiting for the email and that can be a bit frustrating, when it comes, you do have to act on it quite quickly. If you have a disability, they will invite you to request adjustments throughout the process, and I'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. Down at the bottom, you can see the unofficial guides URL, and that is some civil servants who've put together a guide for the fast stream for people who haven't done it before, haven't got anyone in their friends or family or their social circle they can ask for advice. They are all people who used to be in that situation and they want to put together some help so that you can understand the process. And it's very nicely written. It's all good, accurate, reliable information, and it's very user friendly. So I recommend having a look at that. To help you with all elements of the civil service fast stream application, you should go and have a look at their success profiles. Again, these are publicly available. These are the criteria that the civil service measure people against when they apply, and that's whether it's with the fast stream or through another route. And at the fast stream, you'll be measured at level 3. When you click on them, you will see that they kind of break down and give you more detail about the different elements. And these are the behaviours that they look at for the fast stream. You can see them all described there, but do, as I say, go in and look at those documents in more detail. It really does help you to see what they're looking for and what they value in their applications. Don't just take my word for it. Here in the green, there are more former Cambridge applicants, students and alumni who've applied in the past, and lots of them, when I asked what their kind of top tips were, what they would recommend, said to people, you should look at the success profiles, you should read that in detail, have a look at the behaviours, and try and understand that element. So it will be really helpful to you to do that. Um, and I particularly like this sort of big green speech bubble on the right here that says, really think about as you move through the process, trying to explain how you've done the things that they're looking for. That kind of reflection and articulation of how you've done things is really important. You can't do that at every stage, but where it's appropriate, that's really important to do. So let's look at those stages in a bit more detail. You'll start with the tests. You get lots of opportunities to practice, or at least they make the practice tests available, and they really do look quite similar to the tests that you do in reality. Obviously, they're sort of different data, different words, but the format's very simple. The format's very similar. You can also have a look at Graduates First, which we have subscribed to. Cambridge Careers Service has subscribed to Graduates First, so both students and alumni can access that through our subscription without paying. And there are some psychometric tests that show some sort of similar properties to the civil service if you want a little bit more practice. So practice before you do them. Find a nice, quiet, distraction-free place to do them. There are two different online tests, and that's a change. There's the purple question that someone asked me in advance of the session. What have the recent changes been? Well, there's been the summer internship program, and they've dropped one of the online tests. So there used to be a data test, but there's not anymore. They have kept the work-based scenario and the case study assessment, so that you just have those two to do. From the point you apply, you have 7 days to complete the tests. They're not timed. They say it should take you about 90 minutes, but it really doesn't matter. You can take as long as you want. You can pause, you can save your progress, you can go and have a break. You can take all the time in the world. In terms of reasonable adjustments, they say that they are fully optimized for screen readers, and because they've built in that element where they're not timed, they're hoping that that will help people with a range of different needs who maybe would need a break, perhaps a movement break, or who might find it challenging to kind of concentrate for that level of time. So it's absolutely fine to do that. You don't need to request that as an adjustment, it's already there. They also say if you need somebody to kind of support you, perhaps with reading the tests, something like that, that's, they won't know, they can't see you, but of course they ask that you do that in a way that's broadly ethical, where the answers are your own work. Um, so they've really tried to make it very inclusive by design. You can't choose the order that the questions come up in, they always come up in the same order, but as I say, you can stop and have a break. You get some automatically generated feedback after each one. When I always have a little go at these just to see what they're like and how they've changed, and mine came through very, very quickly. I think that's pretty typical. It's it's automatically generated. It can be quite generic. Try not to take it to heart. They've put it in place because people are always asking for feedback from assessments and interview processes. Look, there's 84,000 applicants last year, so there's no way they could give you any kind of individualized feedback. So it's very broad. They will say whether within the test they think that you showed emerging potential, whether you're developing, refining, or excelling, and then they say very clearly, you shouldn't assume that that says whether or not you've passed or failed. It's just a bit of kind of interim feedback. As I mentioned before, you might hear back at a different time than other people. Whether or not you've got through to the next section, try not to worry about it. It's pretty normal. Um, some advice from your predecessors is to just spend a bit of time practicing, learning about what's involved, and thinking about those success profiles, thinking about what the civil service is looking for. A lot of the streams have an additional information part of it. And this technique I'm going to talk through now will also be helpful if you're applying to the internship and you're looking at video interviews. The civil service really likes you to use a STAR technique. So if, for example, they ask you this question related to one of their behaviours that they're asking for, can you give me an example of when you've had to think about the big picture? They want you to reply using STAR. So, what was the situation? And this can be anything. The whole point of them using this way of asking that question, and the STAR technique itself, is you get scored on how good your answer is. You'll get, a number of points. There are no points for the situation. So it doesn't matter if you talk about your job in a corner shop, your best friend's birthday party, your really prestigious internship with a top Fortune 500 company. You don't get any points for that whatsoever. You just need to tell them what was happening so that they understand. The next thing you have to do is tell them what you were trying to achieve. What was the problem you were trying to solve? What was the system you were trying to improve? What was your goal or what was your objective in this particular scenario? What they are interested in and what you get points for was, what actions did you take? What did you do? How did you do it? Why did you do it that way? What other choices did you maybe consider and then reject? And most of your time will be spent talking about the actions because you're going to be marked on that. That's where you're picking up your points. So 70 to 80% of your answer should be your actions, at least three, maybe four or five things that you did in that scenario. And finally, you're going to mention relatively briefly, but it's really important you include it. What was the result? Did you actually achieve your objective? Did you improve your process? Did you solve your problem? Was it the case that actually you didn't solve it fully, but you learned something that you would apply next time? And that structure, STAR, is the STAR technique, situation, the task, the action, and then the result. There's no feedback for this section because it's anonymized. After that, for the fast stream, you'll move on to the assessment centres. They made a little change to this last year and got rid of the group stages, and that's remained. They haven't reintroduced those. So there's three parts of the assessment centre. It's held online, and your performance in each exercise gets marked independently. And that's part of them trying to make this as fair as possible and remove bias. The assessors won't have any information about you. They won't have seen anything that you've done from earlier stages. You'll have a complete blank slate. There's lots of information about it in the Civil Service Fast Stream Assessment Centre guide. Read it. They're not trying to trick you. They're not trying to catch you out. They are giving you that information to be helpful. And the assessors are not trying to catch you out. This is a direct quote from them. They want you to be able to give your best. So read that information, think about it in advance. You don't need to do any specific preparation for any of these elements. It's not there to kind of test your knowledge or your research skills. It's about your kind of analytical skills and your general approach. So just familiarize yourself with things so you know what to expect and you feel confident. And I'll go through all of these three elements in a little bit more detail. As well as the civil service behaviours, they also, for some added complexity, will be looking at scoring you against this four dimensions assessment framework. And they will tell you which things are being scored for which elements. So it's how well you think, how well you relate, your interpersonal skills, how well you adapt to changing circumstances, and then strive, which is this idea of the kind of motivation um, and your sort of ability to hold yourself to those high standards. For the written exercise, they will have about 85 minutes. They put this suggestion in that might be useful to have like 20 minutes preparation, 60 minutes of writing, and 5 minutes of reviewing. You don't have to. Again, they're just trying to help you out. They're going to be assessing you against your ability to think, relate, and strive. They'll give you a range of materials to read and analyse. You will have a template for your answer, and they want you to write something in response to the materials that they've given you. They're looking for you to write clearly and succinctly with enough detail to be helpful, but not so much that it becomes confusing or distracting. Um, and there should be a kind of clear argument throughout to inform and influence. Bullet points might be helpful. It's not that you have to do them or you'll be penalised if you don't do them, but that might help you as a structure to really think about being clear and succinct. But use a writing structure that works for you. After that, there'll be a stakeholder communication exercise. So you'll have 35 minutes to prepare for this, and then 30 minutes to role play with an assessor who will be kind of role playing that position of being a stakeholder. There will be an overarching policy theme that's shared with the written exercise. So it might be that they're both in the realm of health policy or technology policy or transport policy. There'll be a kind of thread running through. But remember, you'll have a different assessor who won't know anything about your performance in the other tasks. This one assesses think, relate, adapt, and strive. And they suggest you should be able to think on your feet. So expect there to be some things that the stakeholder might do as part of their role play that might be a little bit unexpected or require you to kind of pivot or change a little bit your former approach. And that's normal, that's part of the process. If something comes up that you weren't expecting, and it should come up if you like, that's what they said they're going to be assessing. Take a moment, breathe, think about your reply or your response before you give it. It's absolutely fine to take that time. For Cambridge students, maybe think about those skills that you've developed in supervision meetings to kind of respond to challenge, back up your argument, change your argument if it's necessary. It's absolutely fine to refer to the notes you've been given or any notes that you made yourself during preparation. They're there to help you. And you'll have an opportunity to talk about how you think it went. And that's really the chance to be very honest about your performance. If there's something that you thought in retrospect, actually, maybe I'd handle that a bit differently next time, that's part of what they're looking for, your adaptability, your ability to learn from your mistakes. So do you feel that you can be quite honest? Hopefully we'll be positive. This is an interview situation, but think about it, show your ability to reflect. And finally, there's a personal development conversation. And the idea behind this is that they sort of feel that this was introduced new last year, and it came from the feeling that traditional interviews perhaps make people feel like they have to give the right answer. There is one right answer, and they're trying to move to something that's a little bit more personal, a bit more conversational, a bit more reflective, where the idea is, as it says, we hope you'll be comfortable to express your true self. So you'll get a mixture of different questions, strengths based and behaviours. They recommend you don't try and over prepare for this. Perhaps reflect a little bit on what your strengths are and your preferred ways of working, but you certainly shouldn't be coming with any kind of scripted, rehearsed answers that you're ready to kind of deliver in the moment. The idea is that it's quite conversational. And again, they encourage people to be honest about what do you think you've still got to learn? Are there any strengths that you're still developing? I said, they give you lots of information. They're not trying to catch you out. And I'm just going to kind of reiterate that by supporting this advice that they've given you from their own website. Look, it's easier said than done, but do try and relax, try to be yourself, and try to enjoy the process. One tip I heard is that nerves and excitement can feel very similar physiologically. So if you're really, really nervous, you can try and trick your brain by saying, oh, I'm really excited today, rather than, oh, I'm really anxious. That might help some of you. Um, Try and take those moments when you can to take some deep breaths, have a drink of water, try and dress and sit somewhere where you're going to feel comfortable. Just give yourself the best chance to feel relaxed if you can. I really like this one. I often say this to people in terms of assessment centres. Assessors can only give you credits for what you say and do. This is not the place to be subtle. It's not a place to imply things or to assume that they will know that, of course, you thought of the obvious thing and you don't need to mention it. Talk through your thought process aloud. Give enough details. They're not trying to trip you up. They want you to do well and they want you to show what you're capable of. So don't think, oh, I mustn't mention that or I shouldn't say this. Give them the detail if you're not sure. It's normally helpful. Try, if you can, to go into each exercise with a positive frame of mind. You're not expected to do equally well in all of them. You're certainly not expected to be perfect in all of them. So if one of them didn't quite go how you wanted it, try and just put that to one side. And the process is designed so that you should be able to, with your new assessor, your blank slate, your new exercise, perform well, and those things will kind of balance each other out. Very few people are brilliant at all of the exercises, and they still get through. Might sound quite obvious, but read the questions, read the instructions. If you're unsure of something, ask them. Um, if you're not quite sure, does it mean this or that? Don't feel embarrassed about doing it. I mentioned in a previous section they have elements that they're scoring you on. They have things that they're looking for. They're not going to take points off your score, and they're certainly not going to take points off your score for asking a question. So if you're not sure, it's much better to check that you've got it right, and then you can give them the information they want to help them score you well, rather than bumbling about, feeling a bit confused, and maybe sort of missing the point. The exercises do put you under some time pressure. The idea is that that reflects the demands of the job itself. So make sure you keep an eye on the clock and use time as effectively as possible. Just particularly for that written exercise, they recommend you keep a little bit of time at the end for proofreading and final checking. And if you can, that's a really good idea. After the assessment centres, most schemes have a final selection board. There's only one that doesn't. And the idea of that is it will assess your scheme specific skills and motivation. And usually that comes from a combination of interviews and perhaps some assessments. So, for example, the finance scheme traditionally has had a maths test involved. I don't know if it still does, I don't have that information, but it makes sense, right? You will get more information about the final selection board nearer the time. And again, they'll give you lots of information, they'll give you good quality information, they're trying to help you out, and they'll be specific about what you need to do to prepare. So, what if you don't get through? Don't panic, there's lots of other options. Most people who work for the civil service did not go through the fast stream. Most people just applied for a job at the civil service, and you can do that at civilservicejobs.gov.uk. A good kind of graduate level entry role is generally considered an executive officer. You might also be suitable for a higher executive officer or a senior executive officer, perhaps particularly if you're a PhD or you've got some other work experience. If you want to know more about the grades, the Institute for Government has got a very nice, clear kind of grid that explains all the different grade structures of the civil service. And the people who put together the unofficial guide to the fast stream have also done an unofficial guide to civil service applications more generally called Entering the Labyrinth. And you can find that on Handshake. One of the questions that came through, or a couple of the questions that came through, is it better to apply for the fast stream or is it better to apply directly? What other entry routes are there into particular departments? And the answer is the other entry routes are just applying for jobs. And what's better about applying directly for jobs is you can apply to a department or to a job more specifically rather than through these fairly general streams. And that suits some people, doesn't suit others so well. There's no one right answer as to which one's better or worse, but certainly applying directly will give you a wider range of different jobs to apply for. So one person asked about arts and culture. There isn't an arts and culture stream to the fast stream. If you're really passionate about working for that department, I'd recommend you look at the civil service jobs website and wait for jobs to come up in the arts and culture department. And there's lots of other examples of that. If you don't get through and you don't want to apply directly for the civil service, you might want to look at other public sector graduate schemes if what attracted you was the fact that it was a graduate scheme. So I made a directory of these, and that's on the careers.cam website. You can see a little screenshot of it here. Lots of different public sector graduate schemes. And then just after I'd published that, came across this new website, which is the bottom one, publicsectorgradschemes.co.uk. And someone else was doing exactly the same thing as me. He's actually found a couple that I missed. So I will update the directory. But in the meantime, do have a look at that one. Um, there are a couple I want to mention in particular. One is Impact, which is the local government graduate scheme. It's opening at the moment, it's open for applications, and it's quite similar to the civil service fast stream, except you're working for local government rather than national government. There's lots of others. Some of them, this is Unlocked, which is the prisons graduate scheme, have elements where you might be able to work for the civil service. So this, in fact, is Nathan White. He wrote a blog for us a few years ago now. He's one of the people who's involved in the unofficial guide to the fast stream in the civil service. And he did the Unlocked program. As part of that, he spent some time in the Department for Education as a bit of a secondment, and he now works for the civil service full time. So some of them have even got that ability to move into the civil service later if that's still something you want. Some of them you just stay where you are or you move on to another job as you would in anything else. I asked previous applicants where else they'd applied, and look, this is really limited anecdotal data. It's just the people who responded to the survey that I sent out, but I think it shows quite a range. So if you are really passionate about the civil service, then some people went for other civil service jobs or things like the Treasury Graduate Development Programme that was around at the time, so that you can get in through different methods. Other people were actually really interested in the idea of a kind of quite prestigious graduate scheme, and so they went for other sort of top organisations that aren't particularly related to public service or government, but just other interesting looking graduate schemes like Nestle, consulting graduate schemes, and of course, if you're eligible to apply for other countries' governments, then you can do that as well. So we saw a little bit of that, but often there are citizenship requirements like there are in the UK civil service. Or you might just do something else entirely. Think about what initially drew you to the fast stream and why that was particularly attractive. We've got lots and lots of information online about lots of different career areas. And remember, if you're not going through a graduate scheme, they don't recruit quite so early. So it might be that you can take a bit more time to search for jobs and you'll be applying closer to the end of your degree. If you're interested, we have got YouTube videos, we have got workshops, we have got resources to help you think about what you want to do with your future. So have a look at those. Some final thoughts from people who have been there before, who have applied like you, and what they wanted to leave you with. So these range from just give it a go and accept it might take a long time. Um, don't worry too much if you're thinking, goodness me, that was quite tricky. Is it just going to get harder and harder and harder? Not necessarily. It is quite a long process, but it's not kind of exponentially more difficult every time. And this was an applicant who was really encouraging you to try again if you still want to. Um, Absolutely, I agree with this one. Try not to get too disheartened or read too much into the process. It can be a little bit opaque from the outside. So, this person found they were getting feedback saying they scored in line with the cohort or below, but they got through and they weren't expecting to, or they got feedback saying they were above and then they didn't get through. No amount of over analysis is going to really help you understand why that is. So if you can, try and just roll with it a little bit. Which, again, I think this next comment is the same. Try if you can to take it as lightly as possible. If you get an opportunity to talk to civil servants, that can be really helpful in understanding what they're looking for and what sorts of behaviours are expected for the civil service. And I included this one particularly because we hear a lot in the press about how STEM degrees are really important and humanities and arts degrees are much less valuable in the job market. And I don't believe that. And I quite like that this was one of our alumni saying, actually, they found the fact that they came from a humanities background quite helpful in this recruitment process. I'm not saying STEM students won't do well in it either, but I just wanted to rebalance that. I haven't shared them here, but we did have a couple of replies from people who were clearly pretty frustrated and didn't enjoy the process and felt pretty disillusioned with it all. And if that's you, that's okay. It's not for everyone. If the process frustrates you, it might be that the civil service isn't the right place for you, or it might be that the civil service is a great place for you, but the fast stream isn't the best way for you to get there or the best way for you to show your capabilities. So I think this kind of goes with the taking it as lightly as possible. If it's really driving you mad and you're really cross with it, know that that's okay. You're not the first one, and it's not the end of the world. It's not going to be true for every graduate application route. It's not going to be true for every job. And I'm not saying that will happen to you. I think most people don't find that, but some people do. Assuming that you're looking at this at some point during that window between the 9th of October and the 6th of November, and you're a Cambridge student or alumni, we've got some other events that you might be interested in attending live, so do have a look for those on Handshake. And finally, people asked me a few other questions. The best way to get practice and experience for the application process, look at those civil service behaviours, look at the tests, have a go, reflect on things. But there really isn't one type of experience that they're looking for. It's not like you need to get a certain level or type of experience to be successful here. Can you change streams once you're in the civil service? Yes, so you can't change streams within the fast stream, or I've not heard of that happening. But once you've got through the fast stream and you've got a job, it's really, really common to move around the civil service into different areas. And that's true if you're not going through the fast stream. If you just apply for a job with the civil service, once you're in, internal positions become available and people do move around quite a lot. What can first years do to set themselves up for a competitive application? Do things you enjoy. Do things that are interesting, do things where you get the chance to improve processes and solve problems and spend time with people. The civil service doesn't have any internship that's just for first years, unfortunately. That summer internship is for people in their final 2 years of university, so you wouldn't be able to do that. But also, they don't expect you to have done an internship. I said earlier, it doesn't matter what you've done as long as you can talk about it well. So pick some things that you enjoy. In what ways do fast streamers typically contribute to shaping policy or delivering public services? All sorts of different ways. It's really varied across the 17 streams. I don't even think I can answer this one. But they will get lots of exposure to lots of different interesting things that you might do, both shaping policy and implementing it and delivering things. This would be a great question to ask a civil servant themselves if you can get hold of one, perhaps at one of those events, or by reaching out to some Cambridge alumni. There are plenty of people working in the civil service who might be interested to speak to you. There are other videos on YouTube where we've had civil servants come along and talk about their experience, so have a listen to some of those, or maybe even reach out to some people who came to panels previously and see if they'd be up for a chat. How much does the fast stream accelerate your path in the civil service is a good question. It's not guaranteed. So I have heard of people who've gone for a job, just direct entry, not through the fast stream, who've done well at that job, got promoted, and ended up kind of outstripping people who were on the fast stream sometimes. Not always. Sometimes people on the fast stream are accelerated and getting promotions more quickly. So it can accelerate your path, but it's not a guarantee. If you go for that direct entry route, you might still be very successful and progress quite quickly. How relevant is extracurricular or non-academic work to the application? As much as any other. As I said, they're not looking for certain types of experiences. They're looking for you to reflect and articulate on what you did during those experiences. So if you have never done a policy internship, but you've got lots of extracurricular activities, absolutely, you can use those to talk about in interviews as part of your application, and you will get as many points as somebody who has done something that really seems on paper to be much more relevant. The process is designed to support that. I hope that's been helpful. If you decide to apply, I wish you lots and lots of luck, and you can find more support here at the Career Service if you need it.